The waiting game, a universal human condition. Why do the things we wait for, sometimes for years, sometimes for a fleeting moment, so often never arrive? It is a question as old as humanity itself, as intimate as the quiet pang of expectation in a single heart. We wait at train stations, staring at empty tracks. We wait by mailboxes, counting the days for a letter that never comes. We wait in rooms illuminated only by the soft glow of our own hope, clutching the possibility of a call, a message, a sign. And yet, the world moves on, indifferent. Waiting is more than idle time. It is a state of suspended reality, a psychological limbo in which the mind magnifies desire and stretches hope into an almost unbearable tension. The missed promotion, the unreturned text, the delayed opportunity, these are not mere coincidences. They are glimpses into the delicate architecture of human expectation, revealing a pattern that repeats across every culture and every era. In history, waiting has defined entire generations. Armies poised for battle, never unleashed. Revolutions anticipated, yet quietly dissolved. Political promises etched into the pages of newspapers, fading before they can be fulfilled. Philosophers have long pondered this dissonance between hope and reality. Stoics counseled the preparation for disappointment, teaching that the mind must anchor itself not to desire, but to the acceptance of what is. Existentialists, in their unflinching analysis, suggested that the tension of waiting is not simply a misfortune, but a confrontation with the very essence of existence. Our awareness of time, our knowledge of impermanence, our longing for meaning in a world that offers none with certainty. Buddhist teachings frame it yet differently, revealing waiting as both suffering and opportunity. A mirror held up to the restless mind, exposing the illusions we build around attachment and craving. And the mind does build them. Psychology tells us that anticipation is not a passive state. It is an engine, a chemical storm in which dopamine surges, expectations inflate, and the imagined becomes more vivid than the real. In the act of waiting, emotions intensify, sometimes overpowering reason, creating a suspense in our consciousness that reality, when it finally arrives, can rarely match. The longer the wait, the more it feels like destiny itself is dangling just out of reach, teasing us with glimpses of fulfillment that vanish before our eyes. Waiting, in this sense, is universal. It is personal. It is historical. It is deeply human. It is a condition that unites the solitary individual with the grand arc of civilization, revealing our shared vulnerability to time and expectation. And yet, beneath this universal experience, a darker thread begins to emerge. Systems, societies, and structures have learned to exploit our patience, to channel it, to manipulate it. The act of waiting is never entirely natural. It is often orchestrated, a quiet lever through which the world shapes our behavior, our desires, our very sense of meaning. We are left suspended at the edge of hope, caught between the life we imagine and the life that unfolds. And in this tension, in this very limbo, the story begins. Historical echoes. Waiting through time. Throughout history, waiting has never been merely personal. Entire civilizations have been suspended in anticipation, their collective breath held for promises that would never materialize. The streets of ancient Rome were crowded not just with citizens, but with expectation. Gladiatorial games promised excitement, emperors promised stability, and yet, all too often, those promises unraveled, leaving a city restless and disillusioned. Bread and circuses, as the saying went, were not merely entertainment. They were a mechanism to control a populace tethered to hope, to keep them waiting, obedient, yearning for a tomorrow that might never arrive. The pattern repeats across centuries. In medieval Europe, peasants waited through lifetimes of hardship for kings, lords, and religious authorities to deliver justice, to bring relief, to make right the wrongs that consumed daily life. Revolts flared briefly, only to be suppressed. Uprisings promised change, but the world moved on as the waiting continued, unchanged. The anticipation became its own form of imprisonment, a psychological chain as binding as any iron cuff. History's lessons are not always subtle. During the Enlightenment and the rise of revolutionary thought, people dared to imagine a better society. The French, the Americans, the oppressed everywhere. They waited for liberty, equality, justice. Some would achieve fleeting glimpses of it, while others would wait in vain, swept aside by tides of betrayal, corruption, or circumstance. The more profound the hope, the more intense the frustration when it remained unfulfilled. This collective waiting shaped cultures, economies, and even the philosophies of the age. It forced thinkers like Hegel and Marx to examine not just what change could be, but why it so often eludes human grasp. Even in modern times, waiting persists as a silent undercurrent beneath political campaigns, social movements, and economic promises. Citizens vote with the hope that the world will shift, that leaders will honor their pledges, that systems will finally serve the people rather than themselves. And yet, so frequently, the machinery of power grinds on, indifferent to desire, indifferent to time. The promises hang like fragile glass, visible yet untouchable, leaving individuals suspended in a liminal state, their expectations manipulated, amplified, or ignored. This historical lens reveals a disturbing truth. Waiting is rarely natural. It is often engineered, nurtured, and exploited. Leaders and institutions have learned to wield expectation as a tool, to harness collective longing for control. Delays, broken promises, and staged gestures of progress become instruments of social management, guiding behavior, shaping patience, and perpetuating compliance. Entire populations can be held in a state of suspended anticipation, their energies channeled into hope rather than action, into expectation rather than revolution. Yet, in these historical echoes, there is also a profound insight into the human condition. Waiting, as bitter as it can be, has always carried with it the weight of possibility. It reflects our ability to imagine, to project, to hope beyond the present moment. It binds individuals to society, personal longing to collective aspiration. And it is within this tension between anticipation and reality, promise and fulfillment, that we begin to see the anatomy of desire itself. The world moves forward, indifferent to those who wait. And yet, in every corner of history, the suspended hearts of millions tell a story more revealing than any victory or conquest. The story of what it means to be human, to hope, to wait, and to be shaped by the very act of anticipation itself. The psychology of unfulfilled desire. What is it about the human mind that makes waiting feel so unbearable, yet so intoxicating? Why does the mind cling to possibility, even when the likelihood of fulfillment diminishes with every passing day? The answer lies deep within the architecture of our consciousness, in the invisible circuitry that governs hope, desire, and anticipation. Modern psychology tells us that anticipation is not a passive state. It is an active chemical storm. Dopamine, the neurotransmitter often called the brain's pleasure molecule, is triggered not by what we have, but by what we expect. The mere thought of fulfillment, the fleeting image of desire realized, sends waves of neural reward surging through our brains. Waiting, paradoxically, can feel more compelling than receiving. The mind inflates possibility, constructs elaborate fantasies, and intensifies emotions, making the eventual reality, if it ever comes, seem almost anticlimactic. This is where cognitive biases hold sway. The Zeigarnik effect, first identified by psychologist Bluma Zeigarnik, explains why unfinished tasks, unresolved hopes, or incomplete goals occupy our thoughts more than completed ones. The human mind remembers what is pending, what is deferred, with a kind of obsessive clarity. Confirmation bias then enters the stage, encouraging us to seek signs and coincidences that feed our expectation, reinforcing hope even when evidence points to disappointment. Over time, these biases create a feedback loop in which desire, imagination, and expectation feed one another, making the wait feel eternal. Attachment theory offers yet another lens. In relationships, the longer we wait for connection, attention, or reciprocation, the stronger our emotional investment becomes. Unrequited love, long-distance longing, the elusive promise of reconciliation. These are not failures of the heart alone, but manifestations of a deeply ingrained psychological wiring that prioritizes potential over certainty. Waiting heightens emotional intensity, creating a mental landscape where hope and anxiety coexist in a delicate, almost unbearable tension. But unfulfilled desire is not limited to personal relationships. Careers stall, ambitions fade, and opportunities slip through our fingers. We wait for promotions, recognition, or the right moment, often measuring our self-worth against the arrival of external validation. The longer we wait, the more invested we become, and the more excruciating the eventual disappointment. Neuroscience reveals why. The brain is hardwired to attach meaning and reward to future events, sometimes at the expense of the present. The imagined reward becomes a mirror reflecting our aspirations, fears, and insecurities, and when that mirror shatters, the sense of loss can be profound. The psychological paradox of waiting is both cruel and illuminating. It exposes our vulnerabilities, our susceptibility to manipulation, and the illusions we willingly construct. Yet it also reveals our capacity for imagination, resilience, and reflection. The very act of waiting forces us into an intimate dialogue with our own minds, confronting us with the question, what do we truly desire, and why? And here lies the subtle bridge to society. Systems, institutions, and media have long understood these mechanisms. The patterns that govern individual anticipation, the chemical surges, the cognitive biases, the emotional intensification, can be harnessed to shape behavior on a grand scale. When the world delays, distracts, or defers fulfillment, it taps into the same psychological processes that make us cling to hope in our private lives. Waiting becomes not just personal anguish, but a tool, a lever through which desires are amplified, controlled, and exploited. In this crucible of mind and time, anticipation becomes more than longing. It is a force, powerful enough to shape choices, beliefs, and actions. The human psyche, suspended between hope and reality, thrives in this tension, even as it suffers. Understanding this intricate dance between mind and desire is the key to seeing not only why we wait, but how waiting defines us, individually, collectively, and historically. Systems of delay, politics, media, and manipulation. Waiting is not merely a personal or historical phenomenon. It is a lever, a tool, a mechanism that those in power have long understood and wielded with precision. Governments, institutions, and media organizations have learned that human anticipation is malleable, that the longer we wait, the more invested we become, and the more easily our behavior can be shaped. Consider politics. Campaigns promise transformation, healthcare reform, economic recovery, justice for the marginalized. Citizens vote with hope, projecting their expectations onto leaders who often cannot or will not deliver. Promises are made, deadlines are set, and yet the world moves on, unchanged. Entire populations find themselves suspended in a state of expectation, waiting for policies that arrive too late, in diluted form or not at all. The machinery of power thrives on this delay, turning anticipation into a quiet compliance. Waiting becomes a method of governance, a way to maintain order while keeping the imagination of the populace engaged but ultimately unfulfilled. Media, too, has mastered the art of delay and anticipation. Sensational headlines, breaking alerts, and endless coverage of unresolved stories create a continuous loop of suspense. We are trained to linger on the edge of revelation, to consume narratives that rarely reach a satisfying conclusion. Algorithms amplify our attention, highlighting what is incomplete, what is pending, what we are told to expect. This orchestrated tension keeps us hooked, not through pleasure, but through longing, a longing that is manipulated for engagement, influence, and profit. Waiting, in this sense, is no longer private. It is industrialized, monetized, and engineered at scale. The psychological vulnerabilities of anticipation, which we examined earlier, intersect seamlessly with societal control. Cognitive biases like the Zeigarnik effect and confirmation bias, dopamine-driven reward loops, and the intensification of desire are no longer confined to personal experience. They become collective, harnessed by institutions to guide populations subtly, often invisibly. A promise delayed, a reform postponed, a scandal stretched over months, all exploit the very mechanisms that make human waiting so potent. Society is shaped not only by what happens, but by what we are made to wait for. History offers countless examples. Consider revolutions promised but postponed, treaties signed but delayed, social reforms legislated but never fully implemented. Each delay reinforces a system, teaching people patience, endurance, and, crucially, hope without resolution. Even when progress eventually arrives, it often comes too late, diminished in impact, or couched in compromises that satisfy no one. And yet, the populace continues to wait, driven by the same human instincts, the same chemical surges in the brain, the same longing for fulfillment that has always defined us. This orchestration of waiting is not always sinister in intent. Sometimes it emerges from the complexity of human systems, from bureaucratic inertia, from the difficulty of translating promises into reality. Yet, the outcome is the same. Anticipation becomes a tool of influence, shaping behavior, perception, and emotional investment. Waiting, it seems, is both a natural human experience and a societal product, personal agony and collective architecture intertwined. Understanding the systems of delay reveals a deeper truth. Anticipation is rarely neutral. It is often constructed, guided, and manipulated. By the time we realize it, we are already suspended in its grip, invested beyond reason, waiting for outcomes that may never arrive. And this is the subtle power of waiting. It controls us not through force, but through our own desire, our own mind, and our own longing. The question then becomes not only why we wait, but how waiting shapes the world we inhabit. It is here, in this intersection of psychology and society, that the individual and the collective converge, revealing waiting as a force that defines not only personal experience, but the rhythm and narrative of entire civilizations. The modern paradox, life in the age of instant access. In a world that promises immediacy, the agony of waiting has never felt sharper. We live in an age where nearly everything is accessible at the touch of a finger. News breaks instantly, messages arrive in real time, and almost any desire, from entertainment to information, can be satisfied within seconds. And yet, paradoxically, the things we truly long for, the things that matter most, continue to evade us. This paradox defines the modern condition. Technology has accelerated the pace of life, reshaping expectations, compressing time, and amplifying impatience. We scroll endlessly, our attention captured by fleeting flashes of novelty, each notification a promise of fulfillment that rarely satisfies. Crowdfunding campaigns linger in suspense, social movements are postponed indefinitely, and political reforms that once seemed urgent fade into bureaucratic inertia. In this environment, the tension between instantaneous access and deferred desire becomes almost unbearable. Psychologists have observed that modern society intensifies anticipation in ways our ancestors never experienced. The brain, wired to respond to reward and expectation, is now bombarded with stimuli that simulate gratification while withholding true fulfillment. FOMO, the fear of missing out, dominates perception, compelling constant comparison and creating a perpetual sense of incompleteness. The more we are able to access, the more we realize what remains out of reach. Our attention becomes fragmented, our satisfaction delayed, and our sense of agency diminished, even in a world that promises total connectivity. At the same time, the illusion of control exacerbates the tension. Technology convinces us we can manage time, track outcomes, and predict results. Yet, the very tools that create this illusion also expose us to endless waiting. Emails sit unopened, algorithms prioritize content we never asked for, and social feeds drip feed events in increments that keep us perpetually anticipating the next update. Anticipation becomes not just emotional, but structural, built into the rhythm of our lives, dictated by external systems that both promise and deny simultaneously. This modern paradox reveals a subtle cruelty. When access is instantaneous, waiting is magnified. Our expectations expand faster than reality can satisfy them. Each unfulfilled click, each delayed response, each postponed policy resonates more powerfully because it clashes with the immediacy we have come to expect. The very tools that connect us, empower us, and entertain us also amplify our impatience, creating an endless cycle of longing and incompletion. Yet, there is a lesson hidden within this paradox. Waiting in the age of instant access is not simply suffering. It is a mirror reflecting the structures that govern attention, desire, and expectation. It exposes how deeply our inner lives are intertwined with external systems. It shows how anticipation, both personal and collective, can be manipulated, amplified, and exploited on a scale unimaginable in previous centuries. And it challenges us to recognize the tension. The world moves fast, but the things that truly matter often remain suspended, just beyond reach, demanding reflection, patience, and perspective. In this light, modern waiting is both uniquely torturous and profoundly instructive. It forces us to confront the limits of control, the fragility of satisfaction, and the complexity of desire. The more connected we become, the more evident it is that fulfillment is never automatic. That instant access cannot replace the slower rhythms of human hope and longing. And it is within this suspended space, between immediate gratification and deferred fulfillment, that we begin to understand the deep architecture of desire itself, and why some of the most meaningful things in life remain eternally out of reach. Finding meaning in the absence. What if the emptiness, the delay, and the unfulfilled longing we experience are not merely tragedies, but teachers. What if the very act of waiting, the suspended tension between hope and reality, contains a hidden form of meaning? To understand this, we must step back from frustration and disappointment and look at the paradox of absence itself. Philosophers across centuries have grappled with the value hidden within waiting. Existentialists suggested that the void created by unfulfilled desire forces us to confront the essence of our being. When expectations collapse, we are confronted with ourselves, our fears, our attachments, our ambitions, in ways that fulfillment rarely allows. Waiting, in this sense, becomes a mirror, reflecting not what the world owes us, but who we are and who we might become. Buddhist teachings frame this even more profoundly. Desire, craving, and anticipation are at the root of suffering, yet within this suffering lies awareness, introspection, and opportunity. The mind, forced to linger in suspense, becomes capable of seeing its own patterns, its own illusions. The pause between expectation and reality is not a void to be feared. It is a space in which consciousness can expand, where patience, mindfulness, and understanding emerge. Absence, paradoxically, becomes a fertile ground for growth. Literature and art echo this insight. Writers have long explored how unfulfilled longing shapes character and creativity. In novels, in poetry, in music, the spaces between desire and attainment define tension, meaning, and beauty. It is precisely the things we do not get, the moments we cannot seize, that compel reflection, inspire creation, and leave lasting impact. The absence is not a failure. It is a canvas upon which meaning is painted, often more vividly than achievement itself could provide. Even in personal life, examples abound. Those who wait for reconciliation, for opportunity, for love, often find that the waiting itself cultivates patience, resilience, and perspective. The longed-for outcome may never arrive, yet the individual is transformed by the very process of anticipation. Waiting shapes judgment, deepens empathy, and strengthens resolve. It teaches us to endure uncertainty, to find value in the present, and to engage with life in a way that immediate fulfillment rarely demands. This recognition does not diminish the frustration of waiting, nor does it erase the pain of unfulfilled desire, but it reframes it. Absence is no longer a void merely to be endured. It is a terrain to be explored, a medium in which personal and collective growth occurs. Societies, too, learn from absence. Movements delayed, reforms postponed, promises unfulfilled. These, too, hold lessons about power, patience, and the subtle forces that shape collective consciousness. In acknowledging the meaning within waiting, we reclaim a degree of agency. We begin to understand that fulfillment is not the sole metric of value. Life's richness often resides not in the arrival, but in the tension, in the suspension, in the spaces that compel reflection. Waiting, in this sense, becomes both crucible and teacher, a silent, invisible guide shaping character, thought, and understanding. And so, in the quiet, in the unfulfilled, in the absence, there is a strange liberation. We begin to see that the things we wait for, though they may never come, have already done their work, teaching us patience, shaping our minds, and revealing the hidden dimensions of desire itself. The paradox of desire. Conclusion. We began with waiting, a simple, intimate, human act, and yet, as our journey through history, psychology, and society has revealed, it is anything but simple. Waiting is a mirror, a crucible, a force that shapes thought, emotion, and civilization itself. It is both profoundly personal and relentlessly universal, a paradox that defines what it means to be human. The paradox is this: we wait because our minds cannot resist possibility, yet the very act of waiting often changes us more than the fulfillment ever could. History shows us that nations have waited, revolutions have paused, and entire populations have suspended their lives in anticipation of a promise, sometimes delivered, often broken. Individually, we experience unrequited love, stalled careers, delayed opportunities. In each case, the mind inflates the importance of what is distant, magnifies the power of what is absent, and creates a suspense that reality can rarely match. Yet in this paradox lies insight. The tension between desire and fulfillment illuminates the intricate architecture of human consciousness. It exposes our vulnerabilities, our biases, and our longing for control in a world governed by uncertainty. It shows us the subtle ways that societies, media, and systems exploit these instincts, harnessing anticipation to shape behavior, manipulate attention, and maintain order. Waiting is not neutral. It is powerful. It is at once a personal crucible and a collective tool. And yet, this is not merely a story of suffering. Waiting also reveals the extraordinary capacity of the human spirit. It cultivates patience, fosters introspection, and illuminates the contours of desire itself. Even in absence, even in delay, there is growth, reflection, and subtle transformation. The mind learns to navigate uncertainty. The heart learns to endure tension. And the individual, and by extension, the society, discovers resilience, perspective, and sometimes unexpected wisdom. Consider the quiet, suspended moments that have defined our lives. A message never received, a promise change postponed, a revolution deferred. In each, we are confronted with ourselves. We confront our fears, our attachments, our capacity for hope, and our vulnerability to disappointment. And within this confrontation lies liberation. For the world may move on, indifferent to our expectation, but our inner lives, shaped by anticipation, desire, and reflection, have already been transformed. The ultimate lesson of desire, waiting, and unfulfilled longing is not despair, but awareness. To understand that waiting is inevitable is to reclaim agency over our own perceptions and responses. To recognize the forces that manipulate anticipation is to resist them with clarity and insight. And to embrace the tension between hope and reality is to participate fully in the human condition, with all its uncertainty, beauty, and depth. So, as we return to the quiet spaces where our story began, the question remains: why do the things we wait for never happen while the rest of the world moves on? Perhaps the answer is that the waiting itself has already happened to us, shaping our minds, our hearts, and our understanding of the world. The fulfillment, or lack thereof, is secondary. The paradox of desire is that it is not the arrival that defines us, but the act of yearning, the space in between, and the resilience that emerges in the pause. In the end, waiting is not failure. It is a reflection of what it means to be conscious, to hope, and to live. And in this reflection, we find the most profound truth. The world moves on, but the journey of desire, of anticipation, longing, and understanding never truly ends.